We've now come to Movie Spotlight, our weekly segment reviewing some of the latest cinematic releases at the Korean box office and online. And we do that with the help of our film critics. First up, we have Jaosn Bechervaise to my right. Jaosn, hello. It's good to see you.
Hello, Jano. It's great to be back.
And this week we have Marc Raymond with us as well. Marc, hello. It's great to see you too.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Okay, so this week we have two Hollywood releases we're looking at, both out in theatres in Korea at the moment. Let's start with the comedy horror film Renfield, about Count Dracula's personal assistant in present day. It stars Nicolas Hoult in the title role and Nicolas Cage as the Prince of Darkness himself. So, Jaosn, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, this is a movie that's been, it was in the works for a while, went into so-called production hell, after it was announced in 2014. Renfield, of course, is the famous character in Bram Stoker's 1897 Gothic horror novel, Dracula. And there's been various adaptations over the years, from the 1920s through to, the 1970s, 1990s, 2000s, and 2010s. We had Dracula 3D and Dracula and Count Dracula. And so here we are with another movie, but doesn't focus on Dracula per se, but certainly plays a central role. Nicolas Cage plays Dracula in colourful style, full of makeup. And for me, I wasn't wild about seeing this film, but Nicolas Cage, he's always around, isn't he? And his productivity is incredible. I do find him interesting, and he's at an interesting point in his career. Joe, Mandy, Pig, great performances there. Now, in this movie, he stars alongside the British actor Nicolas Hoult, and he plays Renfield. And so, the story is pretty simple, actually. He's the assistant to the eccentric and narcissistic boss, and he's basically forced, he's his servant, so he has to do whatever Dracula says, and then he realizes, well, hang on a minute, I want my own life, I want to do things my own way, and he realizes, that actually the Awkwafina character, he sees that she does her own thing, she plays a police officer, and she wants to get to the root of corruption, and so he sees her and almost like a role model, right. And he wants to do things his own way, and that's basically the central premise and conflict of the film.
Okay, so it's about Renfield looking to escape from his job as serving Dracula. So, Marc, it sounds like it could be quite a fun setup. There are a lot of jokes that could be set up because Dracula is such an iconic character. Right. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, the reviews have been really mixed, but or to bad, but I actually kind of enjoyed it for the most part for what it was. I mean, the advantages, I think, it is a comedy, flat out, as the description would suggest. Action comedy. It is very violent and gruesome, but uses that violence for comedic effect effectively a few times. And to me, this is what I think, like we reviewed a few months back, the Ant-Man movie for the latest Marvel film.
Sure.
And I think that film would have been better if it went this way in terms of it's 90 minutes long, it's tight, it's tighter, it has like a really simple kind of premise. It executes, and I found it much more entertaining than that film, which just felt like a slog because it was so like self-important and like had to put all this like universe stuff in it that it's building, whereas this movie, the universe is there, we know the references, so it's not trying to build anything too dramatically in series wise, or at least doesn't really lean into that too much. And I quite like the lead performance from Nicolas Hoult. Interestingly, he played, the first time I know of him, he played with Hugh Grant in About a Boy many years ago as a child actor, and he's channeling Hugh Grant really heavily here.
For sure.
And I enjoyed it because I like Hugh Grant, so I found his impression kind of fun, and I liked. And I think you kind of have to. He's like in most of the scenes, so you kind of have to like him. I liked Awkwafina as well. I liked Cage is great, is fun. He's got a supporting role, but So yeah, I had a good time with it. I mean, it's not a masterpiece by any means.
Sure.
But I did, I had a pretty good time at the theater. And like I said, I think it knows what it was trying to be, which is like a 90-minute comedy. It's directed by the guy who did like the Lego movie. It has that kind of energy to it, like the Lego Batman as well. I think he directed. It feels a lot like that kind of movie, like a live action animated kind of thing. So yeah, I give it a limited recommendation. Yeah,
it does what it says on the tin, as they would say in the UK, I think. So what about you, Jason? Did you enjoy it as well?
Yeah, it's fun. It's tight. It's really short. It's refreshing. I literally just was able to watch it this afternoon because the film is quite so short, and that's refreshing because so often films are well over 2 hours.
Right.
And yeah, I mean it's very Kingsman. It's a total bloodbath. But it's hilarious, and some of the jokes are really funny. I mean, there's a lot of the kind of the F words kind of jokes in there, and they kind of get a bit tiresome after a while. But yeah, it's fun. Nick Cage is just terrific, and Nicolas Hoult is great too. Very kind of Hugh Grant, very British, and the way kind of it's just this whole kind of it's very kind of English pronunciation. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's nothing new, doesn't break any new ground. It's very simple, but it's eccentric. It's entertaining, and it's disciplined. Well, yeah, in terms of its pacing for sure. But it's
Okay, so
semi-decent film. Yeah.
Right. So the word seems to be fun for this film, perhaps no masterpiece. Jason, how do you see it doing at the box office here?
Well, it's a total flop.
Already?
Yeah, it opened in North America and it's mustered $12.1 million. Here in Korea, the performance has been rather abysmal. 9,000 admissions, for... It's not a Hollywood tentpole, but it's got a high profile cast and 9,000 admissions. A lot of films are struggling right now. That's the sad reality at the moment when it comes to the box office. So yeah, opened to 5th place, dropped to 6th place yesterday. It's not going to do very well.
Well, that's a shame. It sounds like it was fun. It had elements to be maybe a decent-sized hit in Korea, but looks like it hasn't found the audience. So that's Renfield. Anyway, let's move on to our next film now this week. It's called Air, and it is a sort of origin story of the Air Jordan basketball shoes. It was recently released in theatres here and will soon come to streaming on Amazon. Mark, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, like you said, this is the story of the plucky underdog, the Nike Corporation, and its attempt to compete with in the basketball market, shoe marketplace in the 1980s. It takes place in 1984, and at the time they're trailing well behind Converse and Adidas. They're mostly known as a running shoe at this point in their. So it's a huge corporation, but it is trailing behind in this particular market. It's directed by Ben Affleck. This is his 5th feature, and stars his old pal Matt Damon, who plays Sonny Vaccaro, who is Nike's kind of basketball scout. He's basically hired to go to colleges and high schools and scout out potential signees for the future. And Vaccaro is convinced that Michael Jordan is the next great superstar and who they should put all their marketing budget behind trying to sign. He convinces his boss, Phil Knight, to do that, who's played by Affleck in a very silly performance, but kind of fun. And
it is fun.
And so they also have to then persuade Jordan and his mother, Dolores, who's played by the great Viola Davis. That's the best performance in the film. It also stars Jason Bateman and Chris Tucker in supporting roles on the marketing team. So yeah, the story is basically pretty straightforward. And Affleck does really lean into the 80s-ness of the movie in terms of the musical choices, the songs, and like the fashion, everything. It's a very nostalgic kind of film.
I was going to say Wallow's a nostalgia.
I see.
I like the soundtrack though.
I understand one of the big features about this film that has caused quite a stir is the fact that even though Michael Jordan is an integral part of the story, we never actually see his face in the film. Jason, it also comes at an interesting time in Korea because this is the 3rd basketball themed movie in theatres at the moment.
That's
after
right.
the first Slam Dunk and Rebound. But I guess it's less about basketball and more about a business story?
Oh yeah,
about a corporation?
it's very much about one of America's iconic brands. There's no getting away from that. It's selling this brand, and yeah, I mean it's slick. Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are clearly having a lot of fun making this movie. Again, it's entertaining. You could argue, yes, sure, it's corporate propaganda, absolutely. But I've certainly seen far worse films. Ben Affleck, clearly, yeah, I love him as the Nike CEO, and again, very eccentric character, but he's clearly enjoying playing that role, and good, decent performances. Chris Tucker's great. He's his typical very energetic self and lights up every scene he's in. I'd like to see a bit more of him in the film, actually. It was a shame that we didn't see Michael Jordan's face. I can understand the rationale behind that, but I found it a little bit frustrating by the end. Clearly he's very much the focal point of this film together with Nike. You never see his face until where you see the real Michael Jordan in the credits. But yeah, it's it's okay. It's nothing earth shattering. I think Ben Affleck is clearly a competent filmmaker. He knows what he's doing. And he's a good writer too. So the team that the duo Matt Damon Ben Affleck team, they clearly do work together, and the chemistry on screen works so very, very effectively. I wasn't as wild about this film as some others were. In America, it was really well received critically.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a very kind of I guess it's a traditional American film. It's about a very famous American brand, and it kind of approaches it in a very kind of conventional way.
An underdog story, as you said, entertaining, but Jason said it still is basically corporate propaganda. Mark, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I was fairly disappointed. I didn't. It's a very uneven film. I think that's my assessment, is that there's 3 or 4 scenes that are really good and really work, especially as Jason mentioned, Chris Tucker, his scene with Matt Damon. Damon's great. But there's a really bad performance in it, I think, from Chris Messina, who plays Jordan's agent, and all of those scenes are terrible. And and I really, the use of the pop music was just too much for me. I found it was really imitative of Martin Scorsese or Wes Anderson, these directors who use music really well. It was just every choice was very obvious and on the nose. And I just didn't really like the direction. And just too uneven for me to really recommend, even though it has, some good scenes. It's very much a film of, okay, here's a few good scenes, here's a really bad one, here's a good one. So it was hard to really recommend too much. And I agree with Jason. I think it is kind of overrated. It did get quite good critical reviews. I think it reminded me of Ford versus Ferrari.
That's a good film.
And that's a much better version of this movie. But that's also a corporate, about corporations and competition and things like that. But it has the advantage of being this action movie and having the car racing aspect. And it's a much better film. But, but it also, both movies take advantage of Matt Damon and his ability to play these kind of complicated, and he's gotten to be a much better actor as he's aged, and he continues that here. But just the rest of the story is just flimsy by comparison, and so it just doesn't. Can't really recommend too highly, but it's not. It's not the worst time I've had at the theater for sure.
But at least Ford and Ferrari, there was 2 brands that really took center stage, even if it was a pro Ford story as such. But this film seems very Nike centered. Does that make it uncomfortable at all at viewing experience?
I mean, you've seen these films before, we've seen the Steve Jobs movies, very much about him and Apple, so I wouldn't say it made me feel uncomfortable, not at all. But you could argue it's problematic because it's pretty blatant in the way it's kind of selling this brand, and its CEO, and how great he is, and I'm sure he is fantastic. But in a sense, it doesn't look at maybe some of the darker sides of the business, which clearly, that I'm sure, it's an American company, it's very corporate, and I'm sure that there are areas that are less glamorous.
Sure.
So
like Phil Knight became famous from Michael Moore's attack on him for child labor up at his factory.
Right.
So that's not in this movie. Surprise, surprise.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was Air. We'll wrap it up there. Jason, Mark, thank you for coming in, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
take care.